Those crimson-robed figures standing silently beside the Emperor's throne weren't just bodyguards. They were the survivors of a program designed to erase their humanity and replace it with absolute loyalty. Palpatine didn't want protection, he wanted worship, and to get it, he built a secret academy in a devastated world where only the most broken men could graduate. But the story doesn't end with their creation, because what happened when their god fell at the Battle of Endor would finally reveal whether he had truly succeeded or whether something survived inside them that even he couldn't destroy. To tell the full story, we've examined both Canon and Legends sources because the complete truth of what the Royal Guards became only emerges when you put them together. When most people picture the Emperor, they see two figures in flowing red robes flanking his throne. Their faces are hidden behind smoke-tinted visors. Their weapons look more like ritual staffs than military hardware. They never speak or move unless commanded. To casual viewers, they seem almost decorative, closer to living statues than soldiers. That impression was carefully constructed to project one message: the Emperor was scared. According to Star Wars propaganda by Pablo Hidalgo, the Empire used visual imagery to project power and maintain fear. The Royal Guards fit perfectly into this strategy. By dressing his deadliest protectors in robes that resemble ancient religious figures, rather than modern soldiers, Palpatine positioned himself not as a military dictator, but as something closer to a divine ruler requiring temple guardians. Stormtroopers represented the Empire's martial strength. The guards represented something higher, something that told the galaxy this man's authority was not political, but holy. Production notes from the making of Return of the Jedi confirmed that the guards' red color was chosen partly to break up the dark production design on sets where the Emperor appeared. Designer Nilo Rodis-Jamero created several concepts, but the crimson remained constant through every version, and this practical choice aligned with a deeper symbolic purpose. Red has always signified power, danger, and authority across human cultures. By surrounding himself with these crimson figures, Palpatine created a visual frame that commanded immediate attention and respect. These weren't individuals, they were extensions of the throne itself, identical in height, posture, and dress. Unlike stormtroopers whose white armor still suggested individual soldiers beneath, the guards' helmets erased all traces of personality. The dark visors made it impossible to read their expressions, appeal to their emotions, or see them as people at all. They became living pillars flanking the Emperor rather than men. This complete anonymity served Palpatine's purposes in more than one way. No guard could develop a personal reputation or following. No guard could be singled out for bribery or blackmail. They existed only as extensions of Imperial authority, interchangeable and replaceable, completely under one man's control. When the galaxy looked at them, it was meant to see not warriors, but ritual objects attending something sacred. But the ritual appearance was a lie. Star Wars Costumes, the original trilogy, reveals what was really hidden underneath those flowing red robes. Full combat armor more advanced than standard stormtrooper protection, concealed completely by the ceremonial exterior. Their primary weapon, the Force Pike, showed this contrast perfectly. Standing at roughly 2 meters long, it looked like something a priest would carry. But beneath the ceremony was a weapon designed to kill. The pike operated at 2 settings. At stun, it can knock an adult Wookiee unconscious with a single hit. At full lethal power, the Vibro Edge head operated at thousands of tiny vibrations per second, and it could slice through the same metal used to build starship hulls. A grazing strike could take a limb. A direct hit was always fatal. The pike's graphite body bent under pressure rather than breaking, which meant it could absorb the impact of heavier weapons without snapping. Guards also carried heavy blaster pistols hidden beneath their robes, though they rarely drew them. Closing distance quickly was what their fighting style was built for. They were extensively trained in Akani martial arts, a combat form reshaped by Imperial experts for pure lethality, full of fast jabs, chops, and kicks designed to drop a threat in seconds. Palpatine understood something that most dictators never grasp. Rulers who want to be seen as more than men need more than soldiers. They need priests, ritual, and spectacle that makes power feel sacred. The Royal Guards were that spectacle made flesh. The priest's robes hid the warrior's skills, the ritual staff concealed a weapon capable of cutting through starship armor, and the message to the galaxy was clear. This emperor was not a political leader to be obeyed, but something far greater. The 2015 Lando comic by Charles Soule shows just how deep this connection to power went. Two guards stationed permanently aboard the Emperor's personal yacht, the Imperialis, had been physically changed by long exposure to his private collection of Sith artifacts. Their faces had become twisted, their robes ragged, their appearance closer to something out of a horror story than an Imperial honor guard. They had been consumed by the dark side itself, and still, they held their posts. Even losing their humanity did not override their service. That was the image. Divine guardians for a divine ruler, so close to the power they served that it warped them from the inside out. But creating the appearance was only half the challenge. Palpatine also needed men who genuinely believed in it, men willing to give their lives for someone they viewed as a god. That kind of belief required something far more extreme than uniforms and weapons. It required breaking men down completely and rebuilding them as something new. And that process began on a planet the Empire erased from the map. If the guards were meant to look like divine servants, then Yinchorr was the forge that made them believe it. The program wasn't designed to make them stronger, it was designed to make them his. In Legends continuity, Yinchorr was a harsh, barren world in the expansion region's Felway sector that once supported advanced cities. It was originally home to the reptilian Yinchorri species, a people capable enough to build city-states and stubborn enough to rebel against Imperial occupation. The Empire's response was total destruction, wiping out its main city and leaving the planet largely unlivable. Palpatine claimed this ruined world for a new purpose, turning soldiers into weapons. The planet that had been destroyed for defying the Empire would now produce men who would never defy it. As detailed in the Imperial Handbook by Daniel Wallace, information about the Royal Guard Academy's location was highly classified. Not even officers within the Imperial military who had the necessary clearance knew the details. Admiral Wolf Yularen noted that it was doubtful anyone reading the handbook was cleared to know more than general information about this institution. Yinchorr was a secret kept from the Empire's own military leadership, and what happened there stayed hidden for good reason. The process began with isolation. Candidates were chosen from the best stormtroopers across the Imperial military and tested for size, strength, intelligence, loyalty, and dexterity. Only humans were selected. Those who showed Force sensitivity were sent to a separate program entirely, the Shadow Guard, which received direct instruction from Vader himself. The rest, the ones who passed every test but showed no connection to the Force, were brought to Yinchorr. The planet offered nothing comfortable, nothing beautiful, nothing that might distract them from what was about to happen. The barren landscape reinforced the program's core message. Softness meant death, and only the hard survived. Cut off from everything familiar, they had no one to turn to but each other. No family, no friends, no outside connections of any kind. The only relationships they could form were with fellow candidates, and even those relationships would eventually be used against them. Dozens entered each class, but only a handful survived to graduation. The academy ran for 1 full year, and failure often meant death. Roughly 40 to 50 candidates would begin, and by the end, only 1 or 2 would earn the Crimson Robes. The death rate was staggering, over 95%, and the program was designed that way. At the heart of the academy stood the Squall, an arena where candidates battle for supremacy in the favor of the Emperor. The name itself suggested storm and chaos, fitting for a place where calm was never possible. This pit was surrounded by observation platforms with a drop into an abyss below. Candidates learned to fight in the Squall from their first days, becoming used to its dimensions, its footing, the distance to the edge. It witnessed countless deaths as candidates pushed each other to lethal extremes, and the arena floor was never fully clean. Unlike stormtrooper programs, which emphasized squad-based tactics, the Guard Academy focused on individual excellence. Each candidate had to become self-reliant, able to fight alone against multiple opponents. They learned to trust no one but themselves, and in the end, no one but the Emperor. Their fighting style was built from Akani martial arts, an ancient tradition that treated combat as the purest way to know another person. Palpatine's experts kept the ability to read opponents and predict their movements, but replaced everything else with pure aggression. The constant threat served another purpose beyond weeding out the weak. It created powerful bonds between survivors. Men who watched each other fight and bleed and nearly die together formed connections stronger than ordinary friendship. Those bonds would become the final thing they had to destroy. After months of survival, the candidates faced humiliation. According to the Crimson Empire comics by Mike Richardson and Randy Stradley, Darth Vader himself would visit the Academy to deliver a demonstration no one ever forgot. The best student would be selected to duel the Dark Lord before the Emperor. This candidate was guaranteed to lose. The purpose wasn't to test anyone's combat skills, it was to prove that even perfection meant nothing against true Sith power. One candidate named Bird Danid showed flawless technique in both offense and defense. It didn't matter, Vader was merely toying with him. When the Dark Lord finally ended the duel, he sent Danid plunging into the abyss while the others watched. The message was unmistakable: your best isn't good enough. No matter how skilled you became, no matter how hard you worked, you would never be powerful enough to challenge a Sith Lord. Your only value was in service. This lesson crushed any remaining pride or independence. The candidates learned they existed only as instruments of a power far greater than themselves. But the duel also served a second purpose that the candidates never saw. It was a message to Vader himself. By bringing his apprentice to Yinchorr, the Emperor was showing him something. He controlled men willing to fight Vader on command. Men who feared Palpatine's anger more than they feared death at the Dark Lord's hands. For the candidates, it taught submission. For Vader, it was a warning. And yet, even this wasn't the final test. What came next required something the candidates had spent 12 months building, and then demanded they tear it apart. After surviving a full year and watching most of their classmates fall in the Squall, the few remaining candidates faced their last trial. They had to kill the person who had kept them alive. These weren't strangers. These were the people they had fought beside for 12 months. They had learned each other's strengths and weaknesses. The Akani combat tradition they had trained in held that fighting was the only way to truly know someone, that it stripped away words and revealed a person's real nature. After a year of constant combat together, these men knew each other more deeply than most brothers ever would. The program had deliberately built that bond, and now they had to destroy it. The logic was pure manipulation. By severing the closest bond a candidate had formed, the Emperor ensured that no attachment would ever rival service to him. If you could strike down your closest friend on command, you could do anything he asked. Every other relationship would feel shallow by comparison. And after what they had done, they couldn't go back to normal life. They couldn't explain it to anyone who hadn't been through the same experience. The only person who understood, the only person who could give meaning to that terrible act, was the Emperor himself. One guard named Kanos passed through this trial. When the final candidates assembled, 4 remained from a class that had started with dozens: Canos, Carnor Jax, Alum Frost, and Lemmet Talk. Jax and Frost entered the hall first. When Canos and Talk followed, blood was already on the floor from the duel before theirs. Vader handed Canos and Talk double-bladed swords. The Emperor commanded them to fight. Canos killed Lemmet Talk, his friend and training partner, the man who had helped him survive Yinchorr. Then, Canos made a mistake that would mark him forever. He bent down to Talk's body and offered an apology, a small gesture, so natural and so human, and it went against everything the program was designed to produce. Vader's response was immediate. He told Canos he had no right to feel pity, that he now served the Emperor. Then, Vader gave Canos a lightsaber scar as punishment. That scar would serve as a permanent reminder of his failure, but it also marked him as different from his fellow guards. Canos had kept something the others lost: the ability to feel. Talk's death would haunt the rest of the saga. It gave Canos a line he would never cross again. Never again would he destroy someone who didn't deserve it. That single moment of compassion, punished so harshly, became the seed of everything that followed. Men entered Yinchorr as soldiers. They left as something closer to weapons existing only to serve without question. But creating perfectly loyal servants was only part of what the Emperor wanted. He also needed those servants to perform a very specific function, one that had nothing to do with protecting him from outside threats. The guards had another purpose, and it centered on the one person Palpatine feared might actually destroy him. Palpatine didn't create the guards to protect himself, he created them to watch Darth Vader. The same men built to worship the Emperor were also positioned to keep his own apprentice in check. The tension between Vader and the Royal Guard wasn't accidental. Palpatine designed it that way. Dictators throughout history have built parallel security forces with competing loyalties so that no single group grows powerful enough to seize control. Palpatine applied this same logic to his own apprentice. He understood the Sith rule of two better than anyone because he had lived it. He had murdered his own master, Darth Plagueis, in his sleep. The rule guaranteed that eventually, the apprentice would try to overthrow the master. It wasn't a flaw in the system, it was the system. Vader would be no different, and Palpatine had no intention of being caught off guard when his apprentice made his move. So he created a security force whose allegiance belonged to him alone. The guards answered only to the Emperor, not the Empire broadly, not the military chain of command, and certainly not Vader. When the Dark Lord required guard assistance, standard protocol demanded that they seek Palpatine's approval first. In behind-the-scenes production materials, a deleted scene concept shows guards raising their weapons in warning toward Vader himself. While this footage didn't make the final film, its existence reveals the creative team understood this dynamic. Protection was the cover story. Containment was always the real mission. Their constant presence meant Vader could never move without being observed. They witnessed most of the Emperor's dealings, even in his private offices. This created an information advantage that always favored Palpatine. Vader never knew what the guards had seen, what they had reported, or what the Emperor already knew about his activities. For all his power, the Dark Lord was forced to tolerate this constant watch. He could not simply remove guards without openly defying the Emperor, and that confrontation was one he was never ready to force. And when the Emperor gave the order, the guards attacked Vader without hesitation. Star Wars Darth Vader by Greg Pak shows this clearly. Following Vader's investigation into Padme Amidala's passing, Palpatine struck his apprentice with Force lightning. Then, he ordered his guards to move against the weakened Sith Lord. They acted immediately, without a moment of pause, without a word of protest. Though Vader eventually overcame them through telekinesis, they proved to be highly capable fighters who could challenge even someone like him. These were men trained to close distance and strike at lethal speed, and even a wounded Sith Lord had to work to put them down. When the Emperor commanded, they fought, regardless of the odds, regardless of the enemy, regardless of the fact that they were almost certainly gonna die. For over 2 decades, this arrangement held. The guards watched Vader. Vader tolerated being watched. The Emperor controlled them both through a careful balance of fear, obedience, and structure. But the system only worked while Palpatine lived. Then, the Battle of Endor changed everything. Luke Skywalker surrendered himself to Imperial forces. Vader brought him before the Emperor in the throne room aboard the second battle station. At the crucial moment, when it mattered most, the guards weren't in the room. Their absence remains a matter of speculation. Palpatine may have been overconfident in his ability to corrupt Luke. He may have wanted privacy for the ritual of turning a Jedi to the dark side. He may have believed that no bodyguard could help against the confrontation he foresaw. Or perhaps, after decades of controlling every detail, he simply never imagined that the one person he had broken more completely than anyone, his own apprentice, would be the one to destroy him. Whatever the reasoning, when Vader finally turned against his master and hurled him down the reactor shaft to save his son, no crimson-robed warriors intervened. The most protected man in the galaxy died unprotected. The system he had spent decades building failed at the only moment that truly mattered. The Emperor was gone. Their god had fallen, and everything they had been built to believe was suddenly without meaning. The fall of the Emperor didn't just end his reign, it shattered the men he had created. Many guards perished during the station's destruction. Others were stationed elsewhere in the galaxy, particularly on the deep core world of Biss, where much of the guard was based. Biss was where the Emperor maintained clone bodies for potential resurrection. where his plans against death itself were being carried out. That the highest tier guards, the Sovereign Protectors, were stationed on this world tell us how sensitive this installation was. They were guarding the Emperor's immortality, but when the news came that Palpatine had fallen, those who survived face a crisis no one had planned for. The conditioning was designed for eternal service to a man who was supposed to live forever. The guards had been completely stripped of independent identity, individual will, and connection outside their service. Without the Emperor, they had no framework for existence, no sense of self to fall back on. The answers came in 4 very different forms, and each one reveals something about the limits of even the most extreme conditioning. Some couldn't survive without him. Their identity had been so thoroughly absorbed into service that losing the Emperor destroyed not just their purpose, but their reason to exist. These men represented conditioning that had worked too well, producing servants so complete that they couldn't function on their own. Others redirected their allegiance from the man to the Empire as an idea, attaching themselves to warlords and factions that claimed Imperial authority. Following the Emperor's fall, groups of royal guards continued to serve under various remnant leaders, forming the core of organizations like the Imperial Sentinels that carried on protecting whatever was left of the Empire's structure. These guards couldn't live without something to serve, and the specific object of their devotion mattered less than the act itself. Some had been waiting for Palpatine to die. Their ambitions survived intact beneath the mask of obedience, and his death wasn't a crisis for them. It was an opportunity they had been planning for, and a few retained something the program couldn't reach, something human. And when their god fell, they had to decide who they were without him. These 4 paths would collide in the 2 men who best represented what the guards had become. One had hidden his ambition for years. The other had hidden his humanity. Same program, completely different outcomes. And their confrontation would prove which was stronger. Their story begins with the man who never truly served anyone but himself. Carnor Jax proved that ambition could survive the conditioning. As depicted in the Crimson Empire saga, Jax had completed the same program as Kanos. He had survived the same trial, shown the same apparent devotion, and advanced to the rank of Imperial Sovereign Protector, the highest tier of guard service. Sovereign Protectors were the elite of the elite, selected from the best guards after years of traditional testing in combat fitness, stamina, strength, mental sharpness, and reaction time. They even received basic darkside instructions from senior darkside adepts, just enough to make them more dangerous, but never enough to give them independence. But Jax had never truly belonged to Palpatine. He had always belonged to himself. Jax had been secretly studying under Lumia, the darkside lady of the Sith, building genuine force abilities far beyond the basic instruction given to Sovereign Protectors. His force sensitivity may have shielded him from the full effect of the conditioning, or perhaps his nature simply proved resistant where others broke. Either way, Jax maintained hidden goals throughout years of loyal service, waiting for his moment. When the Emperor's spirit found new clone bodies after Endor, continuing his existence through darkside sorcery, Jax recognized his opportunity. He conspired with Imperial Ruling Council member Sarsiv Quest to sabotage the remaining clones. They tampered with the genetic material, ensuring that each new body would fall apart faster than the last. This wasn't a sudden betrayal, it was calculated planning, years in the making. Jax and Lumia had been waiting for the Emperor's grip on life to weaken, and when it did, they made sure the weakness became permanent. Then, he moved to eliminate potential opposition by targeting the Guard Brotherhood itself. He coordinated a surprise strike on Yinchorr, the same world where the guards had been created. He ordered the destruction of his own organization, the elimination of men who had survived the same program he had. These were his brothers in service, men who had bled in the same arena, fought through the same year of death, and carried the same scars, and he cut them down without hesitation. The guards would never accept him as Emperor while they remained loyal to Palpatine's memory, so he erased them. It was not just a strategic move, it was personal. Jax was destroying the institution that had tried to destroy his independent will. But one guard escaped the Yinchorr purge. Here Kanos survived, and when he understood what Jax had done, something hardened inside him. He swore a solemn oath against anyone who had betrayed his Emperor. Kanos became the most wanted man in the galaxy, Jax wanted his former partner gone, but Kanos wasn't running, he was hunting. Their final confrontation brought them back to the last place either of them wanted to see again, the Squall arena on Yinchorr. The same arena where they had fought side by side, where they had watched classmates fall, where Kanos himself killed Lemet Talk on command before receiving his scar. Jax remained confident. In the Squall, he had always won. "Face it, Kir Kanos," he said, "in the Squall, I always win." His confidence was based on their shared history, where he had consistently defeated Kanos in every sparring match during their year on Yinchorr. But Kanos' response revealed how far he had traveled beyond the guard identity. "It's a big galaxy, Carnor Jax," he answered. "The Squall exists only here on Yinchorr." The arena was their past. Kanos had learned to exist beyond it. Jax never had. Kanos killed him with a vibroblade in the arena where they had once trained side by side. But ending Jax didn't conclude his journey. Kanos continued hunting those responsible for the Emperor's fall. And along the way, he encountered someone who challenged everything he believed. Her name was Mirith Sin, a New Republic guerrilla fighter. She was everything the Empire opposed, and by all logic, Kanos should have seen her as an enemy. Instead, something in him responded to her. She didn't fear him the way others did. She challenged him directly, showing him proof of Imperial cruelty and forcing him to see what he had spent decades refusing to look at. For the first time, Kanos began to doubt not his skills or his mission, but whether the man he had given his life to was worth that sacrifice. Notes from the saga describe Kanos as appearing cold and emotionless to most people, but possessing brief moments of tenderness that broke through the walls he had built around himself. Sin found those cracks and pushed through them. For a moment, the man beneath the conditioning reached towards something like a normal life, but decades of programming couldn't be undone in a single choice. His bond to the Emperor proved too strong, and he eventually parted with Sin. This pattern repeated throughout the trilogy, Kanos reaching towards something like a normal existence through human connection, then pulling back to his conditioning. It took time, it took loss, it took seeing what men like Jax became when they had nothing human left to hold on to. Later, another figure from Palpatine's inner circle tested Kanos in a different way. Enix Devian, the Emperor's former personal assassin, had earned the title Karenth Impaler through methods the source material leaves deliberately unclear. He had been trained by Vader himself, receiving a missing eye as a reminder of a failure serious enough for the Dark Lord to mark, but not serious enough to kill him over. After Endor, Devian watched the Imperial remnant make peace with the New Republic under Admiral Pelion, and he found it unforgivable. He gathered hardliner Imperials into a faction called the Restored Empire, operating from a secret Clone Wars era base stocked with mothballed Republic warships repainted in Imperial white. Devian presented Kanos with traditional crimson robes, trying to recruit him as a symbol of their shared cause. He even proposed a toast in front of his men, calling Kanos the last surviving member of the Royal Guard and the living emblem of the Emperor's rule. To Devian, Kanos was proof that the last true guard endorsed his crusade. Kanos saw through it immediately. He viewed Devian as nothing more than a thug, a judgment confirmed when Devian killed one of his own men simply to show dominance. The difference between them mattered deeply. Kanos had served the Emperor because he believed in him. Devian used the Emperor's memory as a cover for his own hunger for power. One was real, even if it was misguided. The other was just a performance. Kanos killed Devian in single combat, just as he had killed Jax. Two men claiming the Emperor's legacy, neither worthy of it. By the trilogy's conclusion, Kanos was critically injured but no longer bound to the Empire. His fate remained uncertain as he moved towards an unknown future. A man who had finally moved beyond the red robes and everything they represented. The guards, built to be unbreakable extensions of the Emperor's will, had shattered into pieces, and one of them, the man with the scar, finally walked away. Palpatine created men who would kill their closest friends on command. Men who would charge Darth Vader without hesitation. Men who carried his vision of sacred authority for over 2 decades. By any measure, it worked. The Death Star required scientists, engineers, and decades of construction. The clone army required the Kaminoans and their genetic expertise. But the Royal Guards required only Palpatine's understanding of the human mind and his willingness to use it without mercy. From these elements, he produced warriors who served not because they were programmed to, but because they genuinely believed he was worth dying for. But when he fell, even that wasn't enough. The same program that built perfect servants also built a traitor who murdered his clones. Men so hollow without him that they simply stopped living, and soldiers who wandered to the next master willing to give them orders. And then there was Kanos, the one with the scar, the one who was punished for feeling something human at the worst possible moment and never fully lost it. He walked away, not because the conditioning failed, but because somewhere deep beneath it, Palpatine had missed something. You can break a man down to almost nothing, but almost is the word that matters. The Emperor spent decades perfecting the art of control, breaking men into weapons, turning obedience into worship.